Well, hello everyone. Here to show you the Matthew Crate architecture coloring activity right here. As you see right here is I went ahead and drew right here some basic shapes right here is talking about say with you say like your perspective and basically talking about say for between 1 point and 2 point perspectives and basically the type of stuff I'm doing working on in class. But on the other hand, that knowing about I can tell anybody a story that knowing about that you had I remember finding a lot of these in the yard from where I from whenever I was a little boy, that I can remember that seeing a lot of these what you call, if we can maybe call them like what you call the feather wings, that knowing about whenever they drop from the trees, that they would circle around. It's like they would turn, like if it's counterclockwise, they would fall on, and then they would rotate, they would spin until they reach the ground. And I kept thinking though that for whatever reason, that whenever I would see one of these, that there would be a seed on the inside. And I think if I can remember right, that if I were to break up one of these and to just to get access, just to find a seed on on the inside, and knowing about, I used to think that that maybe there was a tree seed, and if I can remember right, I don't know if it was somebody that told me that, or if I was just assuming that knowing about if I were to break something like this, if I were that there would be a tree seed on the inside here to where you can be able to plant trees, and like talk about, I'm like, the trees would be what you call for all growing up, they would grow up and sprout until that they were ready to be cut down, and then there will be enough enough wood to build a number of houses. It's like talking about that got a house right there, and then if you want to draw an example of maybe a house right here in the back, or somewhere like that, but there will be enough trees to go around after that. A few of them are had about maybe eight or so years to sprout and grow, and knowing about that there'll be enough to build a few more houses. And like anybody that may say, I'm like, that the house and all that I talk about is like for how level that the house needs to be, and then a few other houses in the background. But basically though, that what you see right here is that what I went ahead and drew right here using say with the charcoal, and then a few other pencils, the 2EB pencil, and basically that knowing about that, like whenever I was a kid, that knowing about that, that if I were to plant the tree, and knowing about how long it would take, just to grow, but on the other hand, that I keep thinking about, I'm like, that this right here, I kept thinking about, I'm like, potato chip, shape, type of, if it's pine cone, or if it's just any type of leaf or anything like that, but on the other hand, that knowing about, you got right there, you usually see those more like around the springtime. But whenever you're a kid, that you find stuff in the yard, and then you kind of tend to wonder about, it's like, really, that knowing exactly about what's this, what but besides mushrooms, and if it's flowers, tulips, or anything that's related to a 2-leaf or 3-leaf clovers, whichever it is, but anyway, but talking about right here, you say this design right here, and then I, right here, I'm gonna go ahead and include right here. You got the 2H pencil, but you say that. See the L, I think what you call it, the horizontal line would be at about right here. Go ahead and add that in there. I like to see for a vantage point. You got the vantage point. Get the vantage point at about right here. A lot of times, I probably think about if you're going to be working with perspective, knowing about, you say from if it's 2-point perspective, and knowing about how far away from the paper that they need to be in. And whenever I drew this, these shapes right here, and basically anybody that may think about, I'm like, it's basically a house, which I was thinking about. I'm like, that if we were to think about building a house, and anybody probably say it seems so impossible, especially if you're doing it alone. But on the other hand, that knowing about, you have right here is these rulers. And let's just say if what you had to start out with would be is maybe these 3 rulers right here. Like you have these rulers right here, they all look about maybe the same, but then of course they are quite different too. Like knowing about that you had these measurements right here plus with the calculator. Anybody that may say about a lot of these supplies that you buy for, like, say, the projects that you're planning on working on, and knowing about them, like you got the calculator. I have about 5 calculators. You would think that maybe that they all do about the same thing, but one of them that has, besides a bigger screen, one of them that has, like, say, a few features that I don't quite understand. And like we say with most rulers, though, that if you were to look at them, like anybody probably think about them, like that they can't really do the math. And one thing, so you got right there is like, let's see which this right here would be, let's say 1 and 1.5, and I'm thinking though that but they may say that if you thought about that if you want to go ahead and I was thinking about like so far for create, knowing about anything that you spend your time creating, and knowing about if you really learned anything just by what you calls, like if you learned anything about perspective, or if it's a 2-point or 1-point perspective or anything like that. But we got that kind of ruler right there, and then this one right here will say the not so easy, like you say the non-slick, you say bottom part. But then this one right here would be see, that's a 12-inch ruler. But then of course that's one made out of another type. You say, I guess if it's steel or something like that. And that one right there is wood. This is the one I've been using, of course. But anyway, but you got these different rulers right here, and of course the calculator. But on your hand, that we may think about if like a level meter or something like that, and knowing about the types of work that we more like do. Like with the types of work that more likely would be working with right here is, if we see right here, if we were to be matching these shapes right here, like with the vertical, if it's calling the vantage point, you say for the vertical line, and of course the horizontal line. And basically what you have right here is like these lines right here that they usually say is to go ahead and make sure to use a ruler while doing this. But I know that sometimes if you're working with maybe a 12-inch ruler or something like that, a lot of times it's quite difficult to do. But like you may only need about maybe a 7-inch ruler, just to go ahead and draw this perfect evenly position. And knowing about that, like with anybody that may say that, I'm like, it's too much trouble to do all this. It's too much trouble to go ahead and measure and to draw the perspective and horizontal line. But anybody that may think, I'm like, that with these lines that they are pretty much what you call like guidelines, knowing about before you perform your project, and then you may not have to do everything all perfectly just right, but knowing about that whenever you build something that chances are knowing about about how well it's drawn, and then if you think about like that line right there is supposed to be like, say, in the back, or say if this is supposed to be like what you call like a say optical, if you call it optical shape or something like that. But the way I went and drew the box, and I can tell anybody here that whenever I was a kid, I can remember that I may have said that a few times of knowing about that I can remember boxes. The box shape was my favorite. I can remember I actually wanted to build a box kite. I can remember flying a lot of kites. I like playing with kites whenever I was young, and I can remember that I wanted to build a box kite. If I can remember, I think I built one once and bought the material at the store, and then actually flew it. But it was just like a few box kites, and then anything that was squared. I'm like talking about play tents. It's if most of us here can remember those play tents, for kids, that they were not so hard, set up tents that they had the clips. If most of us have seen from the other videos I posted of knowing about, it's like the easy clips and stuff that you would be able to attach each line, say to where it stands up. I say if it's like what you call like a vertical design or something like that. But something that stands, and then it has like a cover that you could put over it, for like a tent. But But the way I think about though, that a lot of times, so it's like with blocks, and anybody that may think that, I'm like, yeah, you just buy one of those blocks, like blocks like the play blocks or something like that, and try to build something that way. Like anybody probably think, I'm like, yeah, that whenever you're a kid, that you may not want to mess with a lot of things whenever you're a kid, including maybe solving math problems, and maybe doing the math, such as, how come that well, what could be done, just to fix that matter, knowing about that the shape is not evenly, level, well balanced, something like that. But on your hand too, that knowing about if we can maybe look at this, if this was like an example of a house, and I keep thinking that knowing about, if they say that tree seed that I was talking about is like if I were to be building a house one of these days, knowing about exactly about what it would look like. And basically, to anybody that may think that like this looks like kind of like maybe 6 small shapes put into one, or maybe two big shapes put into one. That you have these shapes right here. You got it's like the box. They say that if anybody say that one, of course, looks just a little bit bigger than the other one. So we're gonna go ahead and place this, if you want to call this maybe the tentacle box, and then the Elonico box, the tentacle and then the Elonico. If you have, like, say, the Elonico, if you build the Elonico and put it in with the tentacle, then more likely that chances are, like, you build something what you call, so far as architecture, so far as the tentacle, like tentacle and then the Elonico. So go ahead and put, like, say, for A, A for, let's say, for the Alana. Go ahead and spell it like that for the Elonico, and then the tentacle. For the tentacle, and for the Elonico, and then the tentacle box shapes. For B for box. For, like, so far as talk about, it's like between the tentacle and then the Elonico, the Elonico boxes, that if we were to create the boxes, and then knowing about whenever they're put together, knowing about the type of a design that they usually make. And anybody that may say, I'm like, yeah, well, it's a black and white design, and who wants to look at that? But on the other hand too, that anybody that may think that, I'm like, yeah, that so far as knowing and understanding the pieces for what we're working with, if it's coming to, like I say, of design. And use right here is the blue right here, but I'm like, yeah, blue has been my favorite, since I was a kid, and they may have said it a number of times, but I'm like, yeah, that knowing about, really, that if you're not using anything blue, then more likely that knowing about that's not your handwriting, that's not your fingerprints, whichever. But on your hand, that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that unless if there's like a color requirement, then I might go ahead and a lot of times anybody would probably say that the normal colors that you more likely would see, such as if you had to complete, if you were filling out an application or doing some type of research work, and knowing about the colors that they usually give you. And I don't know, I hardly ever see any brown pens, or I don't see any purple pens. I don't see any yellow pens too many, especially if we're filing our taxes. I usually don't see too many orange pens, or if it's I see a few red pens, but there may be about 25 other colors that more likely that I normally don't see. And like I say, maybe a box of crayons, but normally though that they usually say that if you're going to be completing an application, and then sometimes that they want you to use blue ink, and a lot of times I'm wondering about, I'm like, it took me 15 minutes last time to complete the app. I'm like, well, that's just too bad, but you gotta do it the way that the application asks you. But on the hand too, it face for the Elonico shape right here, and with these shapes right here, they may look about similar, but on their hand, that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that like if we were to be working with, say, a program such as Illustrator or Photoshop, knowing about ways how to import files, and like with anybody that may say that if we were to be working on a project such as on paper, if it's on line paper or sketch paper, anything like that, and then how we scan it and upload it to a program such as Illustrator or Photoshop, and just knowing about that how it's scanned. That usually that they say that is to save it as JPG, as a JPG file, and I think PRG or some file, and anybody say about really about with most file types, so that that anybody that may say that if they're just getting started, let's just say, and then they go ahead and scan something, and then find out that that maybe that they spend about 15-20 minutes working on something, and maybe the file type is wrong. I'm like anybody that may say that it seems like a pull string. I know about that. If you didn't do it right, then you gotta go back and redo it. Just because the file type is wrong. And like with anybody that may think that, I could say to anybody here that a lot of times I have gotten aggravated because the file type was wrong. And anybody that may get mad and say that, what is the difference? What is the difference? What's the difference? What is the difference? But the way I think about it, though, way I think about with what's the difference about these file types. So if we would be working with projects, if I were to be working on this, and then I would actually scan it and then upload it to a program, such as maybe Photoshop, or if it's InDesign or Illustrator. And let's just say if it was an actual construction project, if I had a few, the math workings, and then if I were to actually be talking about, it's like, maybe the levelness, and then, drawing the shapes from the vantage points, stuff like that. And then the next thing you know, that maybe I could be missing a few things, but on your hand too, that knowing about, I'm like, that the way you drew this, but then on your hand, that's useful, but then they may say, well, the file type is wrong. You gotta save it like this or save it like that, and whenever you have to go back, and I can tell anybody here that a lot of times, though, that they may not like having to go back if it's due to the fact because they can't see the file. Apparently that if it came out too blurry or sideways, anybody that may say that if you were to be trying to work with something that you did on paper, and if you were to actually maybe take a picture of it, or if you actually scan it and import it to a program like on maybe Photoshop, and then they say that it's sideways, but then there's a certain part of the paper that got cut off. I'm like anybody that may think about that with the paper size, I think this would be a paper size right here. I think 13 by 14 or so inches length and width. And let's just say at the paper, if the way you scan the paper came, let's just say I can go ahead and use it right here as a ruler as an example. If after you scan after you went ahead and scan the page, about that much is visible. And like it's happened, I'm sure, to a few people. Like after you scan something, about that much is visible on the screen monitor. And like anybody that may say that, well, I'm like that what happened? You actually whenever if you would actually do the adjustments, like maybe on paper, scan something, and then let's just say that. That the way it was placed maybe on the glass on the scanner, and just knowing about that maybe some of it is if it's not showing, or if it was cut off or something like that, cropped wrong, but knowing about from how it was scanned. And anybody that may think that, I'm like, that really if we were to be scanning something, and let's just say that only about this much of a percentage is showing on the screen, that they may say what the screen resolution may just be a little bit different, because on your hand, that knowing about if we were to upload this to Photoshop, which I've known this quite since I had some practice with it, and knowing about you do to change screen resolution, but on your hand, that if it's possible to where you can shrink the size of, say, on a normal scanned document, or to expand it. But on your hand, if we were to be working with a project, kind of like this right here, and working with these different rulers, and just really, anybody probably say, but just all about knowing about what you're doing. But really, that ever since I was a kid, I used to always think that, yep, how far am I going to get? If I actually learn just maybe a few things, and then just the way I learned it, it's not the same as whenever I'm in class or working on this project, but anybody that may say that, if you're helping rebuilding a town that may have got hit by a hurricane or any type of severe weather patterns, and knowing about the type from how far your education goes, that knowing about really that if it matters on the fact about knowing about for how much time you're willing to spend on trying to get something correct, and knowing about anybody that may say that really that if you worked hard and maybe got your degree, and then the next thing you know it was like, yeah, you worked hard and got your degree, but then you may be thinking about that there ain't too many jobs open that would hire somebody with your type of study, and knowing about. But I could tell anybody here that really it all really basically requires a lot of hard work and study, but I'm sure that there are jobs out there, and I keep thinking about, is the job going to happen before graduation? But I'm like, well, all a matter of knowing about is to keep yourself busy for what you're studying for, and like talk about to keep in mind knowing about for what interest, for what's interesting, knowing about between the Ionico and then between the Ionico and then the tonic. They talk about the tonico, the Ionico, and then the tonico shapes of if it's any type of name that you may have for the shapes, but on the other hand, that knowing about that with what I'm doing right here, and I can tell anybody here that this car also reminds me of a story back then from whenever I would make paper airplanes. If most of everybody here can remember paper airplanes, it's like after you fold the paper a certain way, and then you really just gotta fold it at the correct position, just for the plane to fly. And like I can remember I made a few of them, and I can tell anybody here it's not a piece of cake, or what we call a piece of cake. It's not so easy, especially if you're just what you call maybe just messing around and just folding it different directions, whichever it is. But on the other hand, that knowing about, like, there's like a type of way to how to fold a paper. I could tell anybody here, if most of us have experience with making a paper airplane, if it follows anything such as perspective, like a vantage point right here, is that if we were to actually fold the wings at a certain angle, just to get the airplane to fly, for it to catch the wind, and then for it to fly from a certain distance. Like with anybody that may say that if most of us have made a paper airplane, which they may say that I'm sure that you're using some type of mathematical study for that as well. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and use right here is the colors right here. Go ahead and use right here is the green right here. I'm sure that I'm like, trying to few of the colors I have right here, trying to get them to work out as well. But see here, go ahead and use. I'm like, after working with these pencils and knowing about how well these colors show up. But I'm like, gonna draw the lawn right here. But just add a little bit of color right here. Anybody that may wonder, I'm like, with the house right here, that if I, like say on one of my drawings working on, if, let's just say that, go ahead and draw, say, a chimney on the top right here. If I want to say, one of these days I would like to have one. Anybody that may wonder, I'm like, well, that nowadays with heating and air conditioning units, that you really don't need a fireplace just to heat and cool, just to heat your home. And what would you do without an air conditioner? Like for the summertime, like I say, you got the chimney right there. And let's just say that anybody that may wonder that, for my future home, if I want to go ahead and maybe have like maybe a satellite dish on the top or something. Anybody that may wonder, I'm like, that for your future home, if you would maybe like to have a satellite dish on your home, and maybe along with the antenna, I'm like, anybody that may say that, I'm like, antennas don't look like that nowadays. But I'm sure that anybody's home, in the future, if they're going to have any type of entertainment, such as cable or internet, like the wireless, that they say that more likely if they're going to have anything for our futures homes in the future, it's not going to be on top of the roof. I'm like that anybody probably say the future about home design, it's not going to be on the roof. That more likely they're going to say it's going to be like, say, maybe a little converter box that they would maybe install on the wall. You can mount it up on the wall or on a shelf or something like that. Something that's going to be like a small device that you can have inside your home that would be able to supply the networking that you need, just to use, for you to enjoy at home. And like anybody that I, think mentioned before, is that if I were to be if this was I say this was like a design for my house, and just thinking about the things that I would like to have at home, that a lot of things that I enjoyed working with in the classroom or at work or wherever it was, and then like anybody probably saying, like, yeah, if you would like to bring it home with you. But I can tell anybody here, I think the first thing I did want to bring home with me was the computer. I'm like, yeah, it was, I don't think it was, whenever I was in school, if I can remember right, I think I may want to bring a model truck. I think it was a fire truck, a toy fire truck. If I can remember right, I think I did want to bring a toy truck home, and maybe a toy car home to play with, like maybe Mr. Potato Head or anything like that, anything that I was playing with in school, and I wanted to bring it home with me. And I think one of those that was maybe a toy fire truck, or maybe a piggy bank or something like that. Any kids that may say that, I'm like, yeah, that the things that they wanted to take home with them after they got out of daycare, or somewhere, if they were leaving the babysitters, and knowing about like the things that they would like to take home with them, and knowing about one of them, like maybe a basketball, or any type of ball or block set, Lego set, or puzzles, you name it. Like anything that kept you entertained for a couple of hours, and knowing about anything that you want to take home with you. But just knowing about with me though, talk about this coloring activity right here. Basically talk about, say, a seed to what you call is like, talks about it's like for the new beginning, and knowing about that if we want to, like a lot of times whenever I was a kid, that you want to actually create something, and knowing about how far I would go with it and how long it would last. But really that knowing about how much of the study, and knowing about the hard work, and knowing about if it comes to that point of time. Just like talking about for that point of time, is you have right here, if most of us seen right here, is like at this right here, where like what you call is like a for the longitude, like for land, like if for the vantage point, and then you have is the for horizontal line, but that would more likely be like if I can remember right, yeah. So far as talk about, say, for perspective, for these different lines, and anybody that may wonder, I'm like, yeah, it all just takes, you say, what you call that common sense of knowing about exactly about where everything is. If most of us see right here, is I went ahead and drew, like, say, a star symbol, and basically that with these points right here, these are like some people that may think that these are like, say, kind of like a guideline for what you got to follow for, like, if we were to be making a design of a building, or if it's a house or any type of structure design, knowing about if say for some matrix, and it's like if it's anything to do with, like, for 2-point perspective, and just knowing about that, anybody that, I'm like, yeah, the diamond shape right here. If you have all together about 3 or 4 different line perspectives right here, then it would be like, say, maybe like a little bit like, say, a diamond shape right there. But on the other hand, that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that are these lines still visible after you're done with the work? And a lot of times that they usually say that if you would be working maybe like on a program, though, that they usually that they are not visible. Knowing about that, yeah, that like with anybody that may say that after you're done with the project, is it possible that those lines can be removed after you're done? And like if we were to be working with a program, that more likely though that a way for how you copy something and then how you paste it onto a program, and and how you place it. I guess you say how you place it, because a lot of times with those programs that they allow you, say, to place whichever document that you want to use, and then work with, say, with the tools from there. But other than that, I talk about how much time that you're willing to spend on it, just to make, say, for good progress. Well, hello everyone. You talked about right here is for Matthew Create Architecture is right here. It's like you got right here, so it's like the calculator right here, and this right here, which I went ahead and found, is like you say around the yard it was, and basically that anybody that I talking about is like working with, say, with type of architecture, knowing about, like, yeah, that with something like this that could be measured about maybe a half an inch, something like that. But like I said before, about knowing about whenever if I were to break it and then try to get the seed on the inside, and knowing about with this seed right here, is this seed right here sprout, for to plant a new tree, or is it the possible fact about knowing about a seed to knowing about how much time you're willing to spend on waiting for something or building something? And anybody say about if you want to build something, where do you begin? Where exactly do you begin? By buying a ruler. I'm like, if you want to go ahead and buy a ruler, and then with this ruler right here, they could show about maybe 3 or 4. See, looks like it's 3 different sides right here. You got the 12-inch measurements, and then on this side right here you have see here, I think yeah, you got 1, 2, 3. So it looks like it may have 5 sides. I'll tell everybody here it may have 5 sides. This was a couple bucks that I went and got right here, and but on the other hand too, that it says made in Germany. But anyway, but talking say for straight for architecture. But I could tell anybody here that if I could maybe take the time to make something like this, and it may not be made out of plastic, but then it could maybe be made out of paper material, or it could be made out of like maybe like a type of plastic. But anybody that may say that making a ruler like this with all the measurements that you did by hand, that seems like a lot of work, more time and trouble than what it's worth. But on the other hand, that knowing about really about the whole purpose about knowing about, as I talk about, for Create. The whole purpose about Create right here, I talk about, this will be right here is my key ring right here. And knowing about anybody that may wonder though that you have right here is the sides, and you can see the dirt and stuff like that built. But I've had this for about 3.5 years and fits in my pocket just fine. But just knowing about that, that if I were to actually do the homework and knowing about, I'm like, that for for the next oil change or anything like that, basically holds the key. But we all know about that. It still holds the key. I'm like, yep, this is like the only key that I really have. I talk about is like for the key ring. But just knowing about how far that more likely we would get if we would actually spend a lot of time working on something, and then if it's going to be a house, and it is, and just knowing about how far more like how much work are we willing to put into, say, the hard work effort, knowing about the things that you imagine whenever you're a kid, and just knowing about for the accomplishments, is knowing about for what we see, for the dream, say, for our accomplishments.